Sup D&D bags, my name's Tom and I'm here today to give you my top 5 tips for creating magical items in your roleplay campaigns. So let's go straight ahead to tip number 1. Don't be afraid to steal other ideas. In D&D there's kind of a want to be as original and as creative as possible for your players, to give them something completely unexpected, whether that comes with creating monsters or coming up with magical items. However, as a wise man once said, everything in the world has been done previously. Every song has been written before, however it has different tempos and is being interpreted differently. And that's exactly what you have to do with your magical items. Don't be afraid to go to different mediums, video games, TV shows, movies, comic books, anything that you've seen something really cool, really interesting, an idea, concept for an item. Don't be afraid to steal that idea. However, the important thing is not to steal it outright, otherwise your players will recognise it. Is to alter it slightly. So think about some extra consequences it could have, some higher risks that it could have with using it. Risk and reward is a really safe route to go down, so perhaps if it's really, really strong, give it a high risk, or if it's not that strong and it's just kind of utility, then give it a kind of a low risk. Something like that, just to give it a bit of taste, a bit of flavour for your campaign. Don't forget to base this off your players as well. So if your players are, you've got 2 bards in the party, for example, try and make it based on a musical instrument. So to sum up tip 1, don't be afraid to take ideas from other mediums, but be sure to not directly just take it, alter it slightly so you give it a bit of flavour for your campaign, depending on who your players are and what you think they might like. So yeah, don't be afraid to steal. So moving right along, we're going to be going to tip number 2, balance. So balance is all about making sure your item fits within the roleplay campaign. It's not too powerful that it's going to break the campaign and make it way too easy, and it's not going to be too weak that the players just forget about it or just throw it away or immediately sell it. You want to make sure that this magical item you've created falls right on that line in between those two. It's not too powerful, but it's not too weak, and it falls right in that sweet spot. Now, gauging that can be quite difficult sometimes, unless you go through the steps and the motions of thinking, what are my players going to do with this, and how can my players abuse this? For example, time is a very, very powerful element in anything. Time travel itself gets really convoluted and really crazy. So if you have an idea or an item around time, you really need to make sure you limit its ability. Otherwise, your players are going to be time travelling back and forward everywhere. It's going to be a nightmare to keep a track of where things are going from a DM perspective. So let's say if you're going with an item regarding time travel, you need to make sure, yes, it is useful and it's interesting. However, it's not too powerful that it's going to disrupt the entire campaign. So you need to come up with relevant limits for that item. So you need to think, okay, so I want things to be able to go back in time. Perhaps instead of going back in time all the way, it just captures a small snapshot of time. So it's almost like taking a picture and you can travel back to that one part, but you can't go any further. Something like a limit like that which doesn't detract the value of the item, because it's really useful, because you might take a picture of a battle scene, or you might take a picture of a crime scene that you need to investigate again and again. However, the limits of it don't allow you to just go out and explore the world, so it's not basically a reverse time. Does that make any sense? I don't even know if I'm making any sense. An easy way to make sure that your item is balanced and stays relevant throughout the campaign is to give it utility rather than straight up damage. So a sword that can leads to hidden rooms by shining a light, something like Shadow of the Colossus, that would be useful throughout the entire campaign. However, if it was just a base kind of damage increase on that sword, eventually the players are going to find something more useful and throw that away. So think about what you want your magical item to be. Do you want it to be a quick throwaway, or do you want it to be a permanent item that they're going to keep throughout the campaign? Okay, so to sum up balance then, you need to make sure you have a keen idea of what you want your magical weapon, item, armour to be. Do you want it to be a permanent mainstay in the campaign, therefore give it perhaps some more utility power, or do you want it to be a quick throwaway item that gives you a boost for that particular dungeon or that particular arc that you're working through? Once you have that concept, then you need to work out, okay, how far can the players abuse this item? Is it abusable in a way that's game-breaking, or is it just going to be useful in terms of certain situations they encounter? So you need to kind of think through, go into the player's shoes and start thinking through, okay, how would I abuse this item if I could? Okay, moving on to tip number 3, we're going to be talking about backstory and baggage. No one doesn't love a magical item that has a really cool backstory. Now, it doesn't have to be extremely elaborate. It can be, you know, quick couple of sentences, paragraph about where this item or weapon has come from. Giving it a bit more history makes it more interesting for the players, and especially if they find it in a relevant place as well. A witch's staff, for example, that has a history of killing innocents in a nearby village in order to extract their souls and extend the witch's life force. Something like that, where it has a history and the village has been talking about it and you finally find it in the witch's hut. It kind of adds that backstory to it. But also, importantly, it adds baggage to that item as well. So if you went around that village, you know, the one that had a few souls taken from it, with this staff, they're going to fear for their lives because they've seen it before, they've seen what it can do. So again, a lot of the items will have baggage attached to it. It could have belonged to a hero, therefore this item is revered and very much sought after, which might make it a target for thieves, trying to steal it from you, so you have to kind of watch it at all times, otherwise they're going to take it. Or it could be a weapon that's very much feared or has some negative connotations to it, where people, if they see that item on you, they're going to react negatively to you and maybe won't even interact with you at all. Now, I'm not saying that every single magical item needs a backstory. It just has to be short, just to add, again, that kind of flavour to your magical item that you're creating, just to give the players a real sense of satisfaction when they pick up this weapon, they realise its backstory, and you know what? They may even quest to continue on its backstory. You know, it may have belonged to a hero. Where's that hero's final resting place? I want to reunite his item, his weapon with him. Or I want to find the bard that used to use this and kind of ask him a few more questions about how to unlock the real potential of this particular magical loot. Moving straight on to tip number 4, something that I'm very guilty of. Do not give out too many magical items. There's something that can really devalue magical items as a whole in your campaign, which you definitely do not want to do. Magical items are normally like a reward that you'll give the players at the end of a dungeon or at the end of a story arc. You know, you want to reward them, you want to make it feel like, wow, yes, I've earned this is cool, now I finally get to use this power, I finally have overcome something and I finally get this reward, which is great. But if you kind of give out magical items willy-nilly and every single dresser that they're opening, every single drawer or cupboard that they get into has a magical item, magical trinket, then of course it's going to devalue things. You can have too much of a good thing. These items have a purpose, they have a history, and they're not going to be strewn everywhere. They're only going to be in the hardest places to find. Otherwise, you know, merchants would have got their hands on them, normal adventurers would have sold them off already. So these magical items need to be really well hidden, so like the average Joe public can't find them, however your heroes on their particular adventure can find them. And again, another problem about giving out too many magical items is the unforeseen consequences. Player agency is a really strong thing. Players can do whatever, and I'm sure as a DM or a GM, if you've played a few sessions, you already know that the players will do whatever they want and you need to be ready to adapt. And that becomes even harder when they have a whole host of magical items at their disposal, and you have to keep track of all of these things and their limits and their abilities. So having too many magical items is going to be a detriment to you as well as devaluing magical items as a whole. If they can go back in time, but they can also go back in time and then leave something there with another magical item, like a teleporter or something, then what does that mean? How does that work? Do you know what I mean? You need to think about these interactions. Again though, you know, obviously you want to limit this to make sure it doesn't get too confusing. However, again, player agency is such a great thing that they might use these items in an unforeseen way, which is absolutely fantastic and adds for something really, really cool in your campaign. So you want to think about it a little bit just to make sure that they can't abuse it again. However, you know, obviously letting them be creative with the items is something that can really add, again, more flavour to your campaign and add something like a really cool misadventure that you didn't expect to your campaign as well. And moving on to the last tip, tip number 5, simply don't be afraid to take away or nerf items. And what I mean by that is, let's say you've given the party something really overpowered or it had consequences that you didn't foresee and it's going to have big impact on the campaign that you've planned out, and you don't want to do that because you've obviously spent all your hours planning this thing and you don't want that to go to waste. If you have a magical item and it has a very strong power, it's going to be the target of thieves, it's going to be the target of opportunists, anyone that can get their hands on it, anyone that can charm you or buy it off you, everyone's going to be at you constantly. So that's one way to try and get rid of this item or part the item from the party if it is too strong. Perhaps they're camping out and someone that's been tracking them this whole time steals the item, runs away with it. Now, in the ensuing chase, if they happen to catch the thief, perhaps the thief has dropped it and broken it, so it's limited its power, and then it gives you time to kind of amend what you originally wrote for the item to kind of scale back the power a bit. Again, they could perhaps potentially break it, so perhaps they're using the item again and again and again constantly because it's so easy to abuse. And perhaps using it again and again and again, it kind of overloads the item and breaks it. Perhaps it wasn't intended to be used so thoroughly, so intensely, so it kind of just breaks on its own accord, which again gives you that time to limit its ability. Yes, obviously, if the item is so game-breaking and you've accidentally given it to them, yes, by all means, talk to the players. However, I think it's more fun to try and work that within the campaign. If you got your hands on a magical trinket in real life, you'd be swarmed by people, you'd be swarmed by the press, you'd be swarmed by people who want to buy it off you, whatever. So again, you've got to think about if your players have stumbled upon this item, word travels quickly that they've got this, everyone wants a piece of it, which might be more hassle than it's even worth. So yeah, definitely think about how you can implement that into your magical item, into your campaign, if it's just too strong. And that's it for today. Those are my top 5 tips for creating magical items. Put your suggestions, your magical items down in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. I've got plenty more content coming. I've got my Item of the Week series where I'll be going into backstories and elaborating more on individual magical items. Be sure to follow me on Twitter as well, where I do hashtag Item of the Day, where I'm coming up with small little ideas you can implement into your campaign, and I'll have other videos on this channel as well, just going through general D&D discussions. But thank you very much for joining me today.